All right. Well, we've got a great segment here, everyone. We've got Jason Schmidt from the Community and Alliances team from Nginx, solution architect there. Jason, welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
Now, before we get into the topic that we're actually going to talk about, how did you get into tech? What's your background?
I cooked my way through high school and college and decided early on I never wanted to work in a kitchen that long again. Uh, so I went and got a business degree, which of course meant that I worked in IT because in my group I was the guy who knew how to turn the computers off and on. So that started a career in tech, and I have bounced around tech for my entire career and just gone from programming to administration to project management to product management. So yeah, I'm the guy with the business degree who knew how to turn computers on that just somehow made a career out of tech.
Nice.
Wow.
And is that all self taught? You have any, like, did you take classes or just like dig in and figure it out and go?
Most of it's self-taught. I'm also the guy who has a full-size server rack in his house because I, I want to see how things break. I want to see how things work, and that curiosity of this could there's a better way to do this. Obviously, I just haven't found it. Is what's driven me most of my career. When I hear we can't do that, I want to go figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, there's a Picard quote. It's like everything's impossible until it's not, kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, okay. So how did you end up with Nginx?
Well, I had worked for a company in the Bay Area that was a cloud provider that was bought up by a big multinational conglomerate, and so I did the super huge company thing for a while, and then I bounced over to a startup, and I think you guys have probably experienced this as well. Like the people that you worked with 20 years ago somehow are the same people you work with today. You just kind of go between different jobs with them, and I essentially followed friends and colleagues to jobs, and I was working for a small startup in the Bay Area that was focused on edge computing, and I realized we weren't really going anywhere. And a friend of mine, Elijah Zupancic, was on the Community Alliances team, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're hiring." And at the time, I didn't need a job, but it's like, yeah, I'll put I'll put a resume in. What's it going to hurt? And then a month later, I was at Nginx. So it was pretty whirlwind. And the thing that got me was the Community Alliance team. When I talked to everybody, they said, "Look, we get to go out and all the things that you've said that you like to do, kind of find new ways to do things to prove the impossible. This is kind of our mandate." So with that, I joined Nginx and became part of the Community Alliances team.
Nice. And so
Nice.
the Community and Alliances team, the charters is make impossible things possible. What are some of the other things the Community and Alliances team does?
We have our mandate's kind of twofold. We have our partners, our ecosystem partners, so companies like Sumo Logic, JFrog, Lightstep that we work with, and then we have the open source side to like let's build things with open source, and there's so much crossover between the two. So a company like JFrog has open source bits, and they have their commercial stuff, and then Sumo Logic, same thing, Lightstep and Nginx. As we go back to our open source roots, we have commercial products, but we also support so much open source. I've used Nginx for most of my career. Uh, I've used Nginx in places I didn't know I was using Nginx until something broke and I had to look at it.
Hmm.
So our mandate is how do we make this all work together? How do we talk to our partners? How do we talk to our open source communities? How do we build this community around Nginx that takes into account both the open source users, the hobbyists with the rack in their garage, so to speak, and the huge company? How do we find common cause and make this all go forward? And ideally with us, Nginx and the wider F5 organization as part of that.
Well, that's a great segue. You couldn't have given me a better softball. with that intro. And it's like, so what is our topic of the day? Nginx and Mara.
So Mara is what happens when you have a group like the Community Alliances team, specifically the engineering group. We all come from different backgrounds. So I come from a heavily operational background. Elijah comes from a heavily engineering development background. Javier's development. Damien is more coming from the operations side like me. Dylan is from like the QA world. And every one of us has kind of poked at this whole concept of what is a modern application. We were asked, hey guys, do something with modern applications. And we say, you know what we'll do? We'll go out there, we'll find something, and we'll look at it, we'll understand it, we'll build on it. And then we looked, and there was nothing. There was nothing that did what we wanted to do. And we found things like, oh, here's something this is great. I've now got to sign up for 4 different time limited trials, or this is going to be great, but it doesn't work. So we found all these like these anti-patterns, and finally I remember we was like, you know what, I guess we're going to have to build this thing. So Mara started out as, let's build a modern application. Let's take an application, because that's what we talk about, modern applications, but there's all this other stuff that you need for a modern application. We need to manage it. We need to like logging. We need to have observability. We probably like it to be highly available. So all these things are part of the modern application, but they kind of get pushed under the carpet. So Mara was a way to surface that. Mara was a way to show that, hey, we can use open source and build a modern application that provides us with the ability to run as is. But for big enterprises that want to use their own tooling or want to use commercial products, slot them in. It doesn't, Mara being built on open source is, we want open protocols, we want to be open, but we want to allow that area, because we know some companies don't want to rely totally on open source because they're worried about governance, they're worried about supply chain. So let's put something together that is, and we say this in a couple of our talks, a scaffolding. Put the pieces in you want, take out the ones you don't.
So, question on that: when you were going out and looking for this definition of modern applications, were you saying that you couldn't find a definition for that term itself, or you couldn't find an architecture that was kind of pre-built as an example, or both?
We couldn't find an architecture, and then even the definition. It's one of those modern applications is kind of like, it's to go to Pirates of the Caribbean. It's like the pirate code. It's a lot of guidelines out there, but there's no definitive. It's like you look. It's like, okay, one place says it's this, one place says it this, and I think that in building Mara, we kind of started to drill down to that definition for what it meant to us. And because we had such a wide background on the team, it kind of, there's different parts of it that are important to people. Like for me, I want it to run. I don't want to get a page at 2 a.m. The development guys, they want it to be clean code. They want to know what libraries use. The QA guys, like everybody has their own, this is the part I'm really interested in.
With Mara, is that kind of approach possible, where we could just start with, hey, let's get like a Flask app up and running, and then let's get it up and running in like Nginx unit, and then let's get that running within a Kubernetes environment? And is that scaffolding in place to be able to realize those step by step, or are there some things that we might have to do, on the side, and then when we get to the point where the scaffolding makes sense, you put it there?
So, the Mara dream is to be modular and let things slide in and out. The way it's built right now, so we've taken, when we were building this, we realized pretty early that if we're going to do a modern application, we need an application. So we forked the Google Bank of Anthos, renamed it Bank of Sirius, and we made that our application. So Bank of Sirius, as you go through and install, it plops Bank of Sirius out there, and it's wired into everything. If you have a Flask app, you take Bank of Sirius out, you put your Flask app in. As long as you wire things in, and we've tried to be really deliberate and to document things well as to how you hook it up, you should be able to run your app on top of Mara with all of the monitoring and the management stuff built in underneath it. It should just flow. If you want to say, you know, I want to have the full experience. You know, I want to install it from the ground up and see how this all hangs together. One of the most difficult things we've done is made Mara so it runs on AWS, on Linode, on DigitalOcean, and then I went through and saw our builds from the cloud providers and said, okay, so now we run on K3s, we run on Micro K8, we run on Minikube. Managing those different substrates, those different Kubernetes distributions has been painful. Like we've discovered that 1.23 over here isn't quite one, like there are weird gotchas in that. So if I were to sit down and say, like, somebody wants to learn how to do this, number one, I'd sit there and just play with that part. But you can pick and choose and say, you know what, Jason, I want to run on Linode and I want to use a Harbor registry. And I know you guys picked Elk, but I'd much rather use Loki. You can slot those pieces in and put them where you want them. And the big push, the big theme recently has been open telemetry. And that's the piece we're hoping that takes that the complexity we see with logging, with metrics, with tracing. Open telemetry is kind of the Rosetta Stone to bring that all together. It's like the one ring to rule them all. If we throw everything in the open telemetry collector, then we can get it out in whatever format we want it.
Nice. So with regards to the components that you chose for Mara, how did you go about choosing the components? Because I look at the cloud native landscape like web page that has all the different areas broken up, and it just frankly scares the crap out of me. I look at it and I get overwhelmed and I just walk away. So how did you land on the pieces that you chose to be the reference in your architecture?
So first, that feeling's entirely normal. I have nightmares where I wake up and kind of see that graphic, and basically it was, and we've written a couple blog posts about this, but in short, there were the criteria were, is this thing popular out there? So that's where Elastic came from. Like everybody on the team has had contact with Elastic Stack, and okay, so we're gonna throw that out there. For our continuous integration, we picked Jenkins, and the reason for that is somebody on the team had experience setting up Jenkins, so we dropped that in. So our choices were: is it something that we have experience with, or is it something that's considered like a leader in that area? And so Elastic is, it's, you need logs, throw them into Elastic. For cert management, Cert Manager was the obvious choice. So we picked things that, for ease of use, for familiarity with, and then things that were open, that had an open protocol versus some proprietary protocol that we'd later have to rip out if we decide to change.
And nothing stopping somebody from, say, forking, they switch out Argo CD in, and then, offer that up as a contribution. Oh,
I mean, we would love to have people please fork it, take things out, put things in. We have so many things we want to do with it. And we recently cut version 1.1. And we haven't talked about this, but we use Palumi as our infrastructure as code provider. And the Palumi runs within Python. So we picked Palumi because it makes sense if you read it to the layman, and Python because we figured that was the most likely language people have had experience with. So we've put that all in there. And as part of that rewrite, we've tried to make it as easy as possible for you to say, you know what, I don't want this piece. I'd like a different piece in there. And I have on Jason's list of things to do when he has time, the OpenTelemetry community has put together they've taken a fork of the Google Hipster Boutique or whatever that store is called, and they've instrumented it. And that is nice. Kind of idea of, you know what, we keep saying that we can plug and play. So let's take something that's all instrumented with OTLP for everything. Let's stick it into Mara, wire it up, and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, let's fix it, and then let's write about what we had to do.
On the Palumi front, I know I've looked at it some. I've played with it just a little bit. Still not really completely resonating with me, but the concept of it I like, in that you can do all of your infrastructure as code natively in whatever language you choose. So like with Python, all of your objects are native. You don't have to like go build Terraform or HashiCorp configuration language. Like in Terraform, you can just work with native objects. In your implementation, is that what you're doing, or are you guys using Terraform objects that you've imported into Palumi? How is that in the project?
So some of the providers, so Palumi will ingest Terraform providers. So if there's a Terraform provider for X and Palumi doesn't have a native one, it'll just take X and use it. It has a interface between that. We've tried to, where possible, we want to use Palumi native objects. Palumi does offer some tooling to convert like manifests and CRDs into Palumi code. And what we've done with that aspect of it is, some places you can see we've converted all to Palumi. Some places we're using manifests, and some places we're using the Helm provider to show 3 different ways to do that. So kind of, we're going off a tangent from your question about the providers. But one of the things we're trying to do is to show as many different examples as possible. And Palumi, the development is moving very fast. So I often find myself realizing that this thing that I had this workaround for was fixed at some point in time, because the Palumi versions are just steadily marching forward. Right now, if you ask me what Terraform providers am I using that are wrapped as Palumi, I think maybe Linode or DigitalOcean, but I'm not sure, because it hasn't been an issue. Like I haven't, oh gosh, I'm going to have to use this Terraform provider. It's been smooth, and I've used Terraform in the past, and I do like Terraform, but the whole having to learn the special language, which I always get wrong, was the difficult part. And I didn't pick Palumi, Elijah did, but when I saw it, I'm like, oh, I can actually read this. This makes sense. So just, non-scientific, anecdotal, Jason liked it when he used it.
Right. Yeah, I like that too. And I actually like the decision you guys made to not necessarily be, homogenous across the board with one solution, that you're looking at the different ways that people might use Palumi so that it's instructional. And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of it is be useful, and when I give these talks, like we talk about the different personas that are going to use this, and, some people just want to stand it up and see how it looks. And that's great. Some people want to put their parts in, and that's great. Some people want to see where things break and see, like, how does Elk compare to Loki? How does that compare to Greylog? And as we move forward, and we do have a load generator in the Bank of Sirius that'll generate a load, and you can watch things fall over, get to the point where we can benchmark things and say, okay, this works. What happens if we put a WAF in here? What does that do to our throughput? What about a service mesh? What happens when we poke it in different ways?
So this entire framework here, Jason, this is all based on open source stuff. Like nobody actually has to purchase any licenses, and they can just lift this and put this on top of any infrastructure that they're already into. They're already an AWS customer. They can just drop it into there, or they're running K3S or something like that, and they can run it into that environment.
That's true. The only piece, Palumi, you do have to register for an account, which is free. And that's because of the way they maintain state. And that is the only external dependency. Other than that, everything we're using is using the open source version. So it's the open source Grafana, the open source Elasticsearch, the OpenTelemetry is open source. We're using all the open source versions of that.
Can it exist on F5 distributed cloud?
That's on my very long list of things I really want to try. I have for the SE crew, I have built a version with some scripts that automatically deploy it on the UDF development, the whatever framework environment, whatever we're calling that thing. It works there. Um, but like for me, like when we get to the point where some of these other rough edges are sanded off, if somebody comes to me and says, here's the keys to distributed cloud, I'll spend a week making it work. I mean, that's for me, that's the fun of it in doing this, and then sharing it with the community and saying, okay, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, and here are the things you need to do to make it work. And then also be able to share that with engineering and say, hey guys, here's some areas where we have some friction, because I keep kind of doing the tired old rising tide lifts all boats. But when I do these talks, it's like, if Kubernetes is difficult, it's painful, let's make it easier. And then we can all kind of get on to doing things that we actually want to do, as opposed to working in the engine room and trying to make the stuff work.
Yeah. Well, to your comment earlier about Kubernetes being slightly different to, it's like I've been sold the product that Kubernetes is Kubernetes, and I can deploy and it's just going to work. So are you saying that's not the case?
No, that's totally true. Like, I mean, and it's not, I don't want to say it's like, oh my God, you go from one to another. It's night and day. It's just what I wind up in most of the time is what we call like dependency hell, where we've got, when we're deploying, so we're using Python, so we have to manage all these Python modules. So we've got that thing we got to manage over here. We've got slight differences between Kubernetes. So things like FileBeat, when it's pulling logs on AWS and logs on K3S and logs on Micro, they all don't go to the same place. So you need to make sure you're taking into account the different substrates you're running on. Then you have dependencies between components. So Cert Manager is used by our Ingress controller. Cert Manager is also used by the observability stuff for OpenTelemetry. And certain versions of OpenTelemetry do not play with certain versions of Cert Manager. So you have these weird things. AWS, the APIs changed for authentication. It's some version, so we had to upgrade a whole bunch of stuff, because to upgrade one thing, you need to upgrade these other three things. So that's the biggest pain that I see. And being somebody who was in operations for so long, responsible for these big systems for so long, it's like, that's like the nightmare. It's like, okay, we're going to upgrade. What's going to break?
Yeah. And when everything is code, infrastructure, platform, application, the level of dependencies, all the way from top to bottom, that increased complexity, hopefully comes at the benefits of what the whole concept that we have in modern applications provides.
Yeah. And you're kind of touching on one of the things behind Mara, where we're, the complexity. Like I start my talks with the iceberg, here's the application, here's all this other stuff. And the thing is, if we do it right, and then we deploy more applications, we can scale things out and scale things out in a way that makes sense. It's just, I think part of it, at least, some people I've talked to, is accepting these are complex systems, and you're not going to reduce the complexity to nothing, but you can manage it. You just need to make smart choices up front. And, we're lucky on my team in that we get paid to do a greenfield implementation, saying, okay, here's what this modern app looks like. But, everybody who's been in any role in this industry knows that's not how it is. It's like, so here's this system that's been running for 30 years. We need you to add these 17 components on. Don't forget this is over here. At some point in time, somebody finds a server in a closet somewhere, and it's just a mess. The joke has always been that no IT project is complete without somebody sitting on the floor of the cage building a serial cable by hand for something that somebody forgot. So it's, how do we take that complexity and manage it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And integrate it, like you said, with external systems, because not everything's going to live in that nice little box of modern app that we're building. So, that's where we come with our API gateways, our ingress controllers, our egress controllers, and all that stuff. So, the story here starts not really small, but small, and then we'll grow from there.
It's a subject that we've talked about recently as well, is when it comes to hardware and how, everybody is, for the most part, kind of drawn into x86 at this point. But then you have someone like a Google who can afford to create their own graphics processing unit. And so that gives them this business advantage because they have this one component that they can swap out of that x86 architecture. So the same way with Mara, hey, you have this great blueprint here, but then that business has this extra piece off to the side that enhances their business. So they could start with Mara, but they can plug in that piece that makes their business better and gives that competitive advantage.
Totally.
And interestingly enough, like I just recently recorded a talk for Sumo Logic for their Illuminate conference, and what we're essentially doing is they want, they obviously have their own product that does tracing and monitoring and logging, and they've embraced open telemetry. They're building open telemetry in, which means we could take out Elk, Grafana, put Sumo Logic in, and now here's Mara running, sending all of its telemetry data up to Sumo Logic's platform. So a business that wants that value add can get it, but a small place that's, we just need, all we want is to watch our metrics, see what's going on. We can use all the open source components.
Well, cool. This has been awesome. And I'm excited to get my hands back in tomorrow. I played with it a little bit. Had some implementation issues on my local Ubuntu system, but I'm excited about getting it up and running and playing with it. And maybe that's homework for Boo and I, is to get this thing running on distributed cloud and work with you to get it back, because we both have customer edges running in our. I got mine's like right under my shoulder back here, so
yeah.
Maybe that's homework for us.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it. I don't think it's by mistake that we're community and alliances. Like we're really big on building community. Nginx is started as open source. It's out there a lot, and we want community. We want to help. We have a lot. There's a lot in common here in the tech world, in the nerdosphere. Like we have a lot in common. So let's solve our common problems together. And we've seen with some of these huge open source projects, like Kubernetes, like when people put their minds together, we accomplish pretty amazing things.
Where do we find out more about Mara or download Mara?
We have a Vanda URL. You can go to nginx.com/Mara, and that'll put you right over into the Mara repository. And then from there, there's links to things like our Nginx community Slack channel, where you can chat with us. Myself and the other maintainers, we're all in the repo. So raise issues, discussions, fork, star, whatever you want. There's no question is dumb. Ask questions, and we'll tell you about all the ways we broke things. And like I say in all my talks, we like to be proved wrong. We like to learn better ways of doing things, and we're not gonna hide our mistakes. Our mistakes are all out there in the repo, and then we make blog posts about them and talk about them at conferences. So we want to hear what people have to say.
I love the magic school bus, motto there. Get dirty, make mistakes. It's all good.
Oh, and we make a lot of mistakes. Like that's kind of my core competency on this group. I break things.
Awesome.
Yep, that's one of mine too. I break stuff. That's bam, bam, bam. All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time today, and community. Thank you.
No wonders. Thanks a lot for your time.
See ya.